afternoon. This is not an easy place to find, right? And I heard some of you have trouble finding parking, but the most important thing, you're all here. So let's get started. My name is Lahela Kehuokalani. I'm the acting director of the Center for Chinese Studies. I'm also a faculty member in the College of Education and the Department of Educational Foundations. On behalf of the Center for Chinese Studies, I would like to welcome you all to today's event. On this beautiful afternoon, we are gathered here for a special conversation exploring Hawaiian language, newspapers, Chinese Hawaiian histories, and the power of archival storytelling. We are honored to host award-winning filmmaker Robin Lund, whose remarkable research inspired today's event. We're also delighted to welcome our distinguished discussants. Dr. Jonathan K. Kamakawiole, Dean of the Hawaii Inuiakea School of Hawaiian Knowledge. Professor Min Zhou, Distinguished Professor of Sociology and Asian Studies, Asian American Studies, and Director of the UCLA Asia Pacific Center, who is joining us online today. Is it possible to see her? I would also like to recognize our moderator for today's program, Dr. Shanna Brown, Director of the Honors Program and Associate Professor in the Department of History at UH Manoa. Mahalo to Dr. Brown for facilitating today's conversation. This event is made possible with generous funding support from the CQE Hub Foundation. We deeply appreciate their dedication to fostering education, understanding, and positive social changes. I would like to acknowledge and sincerely thank all of our co-sponsors. And UH Manoa, we are grateful to have the support of Hawaii Inuiakea School of Hawaiian Knowledge, College of Education, Department of History, Department of Asian Studies, and Center for Biographical Research. Beyond UH, we are honored to have the support of influential organizations dedicated to advocating for Chinese communities at the local and national levels. Our co-sponsors include San Diego State University Chinese Culture Center, 1882 Project Foundation, Chinese Family History Group, U.S.-China People's Friendship Association, United Chinese Society of Hawaii, Chinese Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii. Mahalo to all of you for your generous partnership and support. We are especially pleased to welcome our VIP guests today. Kimberly Basford, President of CQE Hub Foundation. Amy Chang and Chang Nguyen, representatives from 1881 Project Foundation. Thank you. Berlin Chin. President of the U.S.-China People's Friendship Association, Honolulu chapter. He's probably still looking for the parking. Francis Fu, President of the U.S.-China People's Friendship Association, Western Region. Ivy Young, President of United Chinese Society of Hawaii. Tommy Zhang, Executive Vice President of Chinese Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii. Nancy Whitman and Stanley Chong, longtime supporters and friends of CCS. Carrie Long, Brian Chin, Lindsay Long, Lee Stack, and Becky Talbert, Robin Long's family and friends. Greg House, Director of Center for Biographical Research and UH Manoa. Cecily Honoris, is she here? Oh, there she is, just arrived. Cecily Honoris, Associate Dean of the College of Education at UH Manoa. Alex Kim and Joy Ma from UH Foundation. Min Baoyu, Director of the Center for Chinese Studies. She's the real director. I'm only the acting director of this semester. We're honored to have each one of you here with us today. I would also like to thank CCS staff who have worked diligently to make today's event possible. Dr. Ni Zhang, Associate Director of CCS, and Gianna Choi, Academic Support Specialist. Over there. And JC Shen, the Tech Support Specialist, right here. And Hudson George, who is the volunteer. Thank you all. Thank you for your hard work. Finally, it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Peter Arne, Dean of the College of Arts, Languages, and Letters, who has been a steadfast supporter of CCS and our public programs. Please join me in welcoming D. Arne to the stage for his welcoming remarks.
Thank you all, everybody. I'll be very brief. That was a very generous and long, well done introduction. Long, but in a good way, right? I mean, thanking all. I was going to thank all the partners, all the sponsors, but you've made it easier for me. I won't do that. I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of friends, and coming here together for this opportunity this afternoon. I'm Dean of the College of Arts, Languages, and Letters, which is a large college at Manoa, the largest college. I think consists of all the arts, including the School of Cinematic Arts. So we have a filmmaker here today, and we have more than one filmmaker. And that's a very important program to us. That's actually our largest undergraduate major. So all the arts, all the humanities, all the languages, except Aloha Hawaii, which is in one of my favorite colleagues, Dean Osorio's college, Hawai'i Nui Akea, and was so happy to partner with Hawai'i Nui Akea on this special event. And then some of the social sciences. It includes the School of Pacific and Asian Studies, of which there are 9 centers actually now, and 2 degree programs, including the Center for Chinese Studies. Center for Chinese Studies is an anchor of the School of Pacific and Asian Studies and the hub and spoke of Chinese Studies here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. It's located in our college, but it represents the hub for the university in terms of faculty, curriculum, initiatives, and so forth. So you may not know this, but we have around 50 faculty specializing in Chinese studies broadly at this university in 20 different disciplines. We offer about 150 courses a year, both at the master's, undergraduate, and doctoral level, to nearly about 850 to 75 student majors and many, many others who pass through our courses, classes. So it's one of the largest training and research centers outside of Asia in the United States, dedicated to China and just broader Chinese world. So it's not just PRC, it's a Chinese diaspora and Chinese immigrant communities, so forth and so on. So I want to just comment for a minute on today's event. I want to apologize. We have 2 other events I have to go to, so I won't be able to stay through the end of this event, but it's being recorded, so I'm going to be able to get to watch it. What really excites me about this event is I'm a historian, and I love the archives, right? I love primary and secondary sources. I love how this event ties together both our immigrant descendant communities here at Hawaii and our Kanaka Iwi or indigenous communities, and the conversations and relations historically, culturally, between these 2 communities and among other communities. This is what makes Hawaii such a rich place culturally, such a complicated place as well culturally, but I'm very excited to see a conversation about tracking ancestry, culture, history of the Pākē or Chinese community here in the nūpepa, and the Hawaiian language and newspapers that were so critically important and has become so critically important and remains critically important for research and work on the history of Hawaii and the communities of Hawaii. So this is a very, very exciting event, moderated by very talented people with a very distinguished speaker as well. So I welcome you all. Thank you for putting this together. And I'm glad to see and hope to continue to see these kind of rich interdisciplinary conversations and collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean Arne. Thank you for the warm welcome. Now I'll turn over to Dr. Shannon Brown, who's the moderator for today's event. He's also, as I mentioned, he's also a professor in the associate professor in the history department, and also the director of the honors program at UH Manoa. She specializes in the history of science and visual culture, focusing on modern China in global local context. Her recent publications include articles on the 19th century female Chinese painter and women in Chinese archaeology in the 20th century. Her book, Pastimes, was published in Chinese translation in 2024 by the Zhejiang University Press. Let's welcome Dr. Brown.
Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you very much, Bayan, for that warm welcome. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to introduce my friend, Robin Leung. Robin is a fourth generation Chinese American who was raised here in Hawaii and a graduate of Kalaheo High School, where my children also go. So go Mustangs. Go Mustangs. Go Mustangs. She has a 15-year history of bringing untold minority stories to film. A graduate of Stanford University and Hunter College in New York, Leung made her directorial debut with Washington Place, Hawaii's first home, a 30-minute documentary for PBS Hawaii about Hawaii's historic governor's mansion and home of Queen Lee Ahlo Kehuokalani, which aired in 2008. She was the associate producer for the national PBS documentary Patsy Mink, Ahead of the Majority, truly wonderful and important topic in film, and the Hawaii unit producer for acclaimed film Vivan las Antipadas, and many other wonderful films. I met Robin in particular when she began work on her truly groundbreaking and important documentary film, Finding Kukan. Finding Kukan was a documentary film that focused on another documentary film that had been produced by a local Chinese Hawaiian producer, a woman named Lee Ahlo. And Robin did really incredible historical research as well as narrative storytelling to bring to light this film that had been, on the one hand, the first documentary film and the first film produced by a woman to have won an Academy Award, and was kind of lost to history. And it focused on the Chinese War of Resistance, or the Second World War. So really fantastic project that Robin brought to fruition and really demonstrated all of her warm storytelling and research gifts as a historian. I must say I'm envious of Robin's terrific way of telling a story through the narrative of film, and doing so with such beautiful clarity and strength and communication power. Really extraordinary work. So we're delighted here to welcome her to speak about her latest project, Pākē ʻOhana, and to hear more about this unfolding and really exciting project. Thank you, Robin.
I'm gonna pause to get myself set up. Okay, all right. Aloha mai kapo. Hello, everyone. I am so happy to see so many faces that I know and even those that I don't know. And hello to all of you out there in Zoom land. I've been in your little square before, so I recognize that you're out there and I really appreciate you. You know, as a filmmaker, I always marvel how an audience can help bring a story alive. You know, just by breathing it in and breathing it out, telling other people about it, criticizing it, even, you know, correcting it, you help the story grow. And this story, as you'll see, is really sort of a half-baked story. It has a lot of holes in it. It's really based on preliminary research. So your being here and taking this story in means even more to me. And I'm hoping that you will help this story grow, not just by telling people about it, but adding to it, contributing knowledge of your own to it. And so, you know, again, mahalo nui loa for all of you here and out there in Zoom land. So I, of course, would not be here. Let's see if this works. How do I go forward now? Can I just press this thing? Yeah, go forward. Sorry, that's not my computer. Oh, okay. All right. So I would not be here without the invitation of the Center for Chinese Studies, and you probably would not be here without the support of these co-sponsoring organizations. You know, all of those logos I know represent hundreds, if not thousands of people and decades of work to keep our stories and our traditions alive amongst our community. So I feel so honored that these organizations are supporting me here today. And I have a special aloha, of course, the CQ Yi Hop Foundation, because one of my early filmmaking mentors is his great granddaughter, Kimberly Bassford, who's here, you already saw her. And one of my first filmmaking projects actually was to work as a photo researcher for Kimberly, who made a film about her great grandfather, a short film about him. So I know a little bit about him, and I know he arrived in Hawaii a little bit about the same time as Lee Ahlo, maybe a little bit later, but they were both successful merchants in Hawaii, and I know they knew each other. So it's very fitting that his foundation is helping get Lee Ahlo's story out there today. I also want to acknowledge the National Endowment for the Humanities, because this presentation, yeah, this is the 2022 carnation of the NEH, and it was, and it hopefully will become again a great institution. This presentation is really an offshoot of research I conducted during an NEH-sponsored fellowship that I received in 2022. The fellowship was designed to help filmmakers develop public broadcast documentaries in the humanities. I wanted to explore how Hawaiian language newspapers, published roughly between 1840 and 1940, were informing and empowering their modern day readers in the fields of science, performing arts, education, etc. It was a fascinating topic and a very ambitious one for me, especially because at the time I had just started learning Olelo Hawai'i. So I was so fortunate that Dean Jonathan Osorio was assigned to be my humanities advisor. I mean, he was so helpful to me. No one, you shouldn't laugh. He was so helpful to me in providing context and insight for all the new things that I was learning, and for giving me gentle prods and directions that he thought I might take. And he urged me early on, I remember, in our working together, to take a look at my own personal connection to nūpepa, or the Hawaiian language newspapers. And I remember him saying to me, Robin, if you look for that, you're gonna find something. I know you will. And you know what? I was a little skeptical. Sorry, Jonathan. But I ended up finding a lot, a whole lot. And this presentation is just a short summary of some of the things I found and how I found them. We don't have time to go into a lot of details today, so I created a resource document to augment this presentation. By scanning this QR code, it should lead you to that document. And at some point, hopefully Adriana or somebody will put that link in the Zoom chat. I forgot to warn you guys about that, but don't worry if you can't find your phone right now, because I will put this slide up at the very end of my presentation too. And this, I'll show you what this QR code leads you to. It leads you to this Google document that looks like this. It lists a lot of selected readings you could explore further that helped me in my research. It has links to my films that are related in some way to this presentation. And it has my contact email at the very bottom. So if you want to carry on a conversation with me about some of this stuff, and maybe even supply with some of your own knowledge or documents, please feel free to contact me after. Most importantly, this has a link to my working research timeline on Lee Ahlo and his wife, Lahela Kehuokalani. Oh, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So this is what the timeline looks like. It's really something I put together to keep things straight in my own head, but I realized that it was a good place to store some real important primary documents for this talk, and also to link up to databases where I found a lot of the information that other people might want to check into. So this is up, this will be up as long as I'm researching, and it will be updated quite a bit. And I hope that you will help this document grow. Now, a little backstory. My own interest in family stories and biographies began at an early age. I grew up in Hawaii in the 60s and 70s, and my mother took us to the Kailua Library every week. And my sister and I'm in the yellow dress. My sister is here, so she's gonna want me to point that out. Just to be bigger. We borrowed our maximum number of books, you know, and we read it under the covers with flashlights and everything. We loved reading, and I loved all the stories that I read. But as a young teenager, I gravitated to the YA biography shelf. And I remember loving so many of those stories. I read one about a blind piano player, and one that sticks in my head, although remember the title was about a prisoner. And all of them were so fabulous, but none of them were about anyone from Hawaii. So after I graduated from college, I started collecting oral histories of my family. The oral history that I distributed at my grandfather Wui Lung's 90th birthday party got such a great reaction that I decided to pursue telling Hawaii stories on video, and that led to my filmmaking career. Unfortunately, all of this occurred after my maternal grandmother died in 1978. Her name was Polly Yoklin Lee Ching. She was born in 1891. She was born in 1891. You know, just imagine all of the stories she could have told me. And I still to this day kick myself and regret the fact that I didn't talk to her more while she was alive. Fortunately, Marion Kelly, who many of you know as an amazing anthropologist and ethnographer who worked many years at Bishop Museum, came to interview my grandmother in 1976, 2 years before she died. She was researching this book about land and water use in Kaneohe, and it's a fabulous resource if any of you are interested in the area. She gave my family the complete oral history she collected, and it contains so many fascinating facts. There's a link to this oral history in my timeline that I showed you before, if you want to read the whole thing. Now, reading that oral history helped me understand what my grandmother's early life in Kaneohe was like in the late 1800s. The district was still very rural. It was a time when taro lo'i were being turned into rice paddies. Ranching was still going on at the Mokapu Peninsula. And according to my grandmother, the opihi were plentiful on the shore. The oral history also introduced me to Lee Ahlo for the first time. I learned that my great-grandfather worked for him, managing his rice mill, that they were from the same village, which means both of them were Hakka, or from the Hakka tribe in China. And also that Ahlo had a Hawaiian wife who insisted that my great-grandparents married in her church at Kawaihau in Honolulu. This is a photo of the Kaneohe rice mill that Lee Ahlo built. where my grandmother and her siblings grew up. And this is a photo of my grandmother's family, the Lee family, taken around 1915, right before my great-grandfather died. The red arrow shows my grandmother, Polly. Looking at this picture brought up so many questions for me. So I started interviewing my grandmother's surviving brothers and sisters. That's my Uncle Harold on the far left, his wife Sue next to him, and then my mother Ruth. While talking to these folks, I learned that Ahlo and his wife wanted to hanai or adopt my grandmother. They really wanted a girl, my mom said, because they could only have a boy. They only had a boy. But when my grandmother was born, she had one eye closed and they didn't want her. They said, give us the next girl. That girl was my Auntie Lizzie. Now, everyone says in my family that Lizzie was raised very Hawaiian, especially compared to her other brothers and sisters. And she was also a staunch Catholic, also different from her brothers and sisters. Here she is in white, surrounded by her birth brothers and sisters, who she remained very close to all of her life. Lizzie was a favorite aunt amongst my mother's generation, and I always was curious about the couple who raised her. So jumping ahead to 2022, I did take Jonathan's advice, like I said. You should always take your Pumu's advice. I started plugging in the names of my relatives into the Pākē database. This is where the digitized copies of the Hawaiian language nūpepa live. It's sort of like newspapers.com, but for Hawaiian newspapers. All those names have the most results by far. 457 listings came up in just a general search. Now, I couldn't read these articles yet, but I started poking around on Google for Lee Ahlo. And one of the first things I found was this Find a Grave page on the website. It had a lot of wonderful information about Lee Ahlo, including the full name of his wife, Lahela Kehuokalani Ahlo, and his children's names, his biological son, Anthony, and another Hanai daughter, Amoy Veronica. Through Find a Grave, I was able to contact Debbie Poi Sakamoto, the person who had created all these online memories or memorials. She turned out to be the great-granddaughter of Amoy Veronica Ahlo. She said that Amoy's daughter, who was Debbie's grandmother, was about 6 when Lahela died. She had very fond memories of Lahela and would visit her grave often. So Debbie had already done a lot of research into the Ahlos when I got in touch with her. One of the things Debbie was not able to find, though, and that I have not been able to find either, is a photo of the couple. We have only one photo for their biological son to try to figure out what they might have looked like. This is Anthony Ahlo at 34 years old. But just by examining their names, we can learn a lot about their circumstances. This is Lee Ahlo's naturalization certificate of 1885. This is also linked up to in my timeline. By looking at the Chinese characters for his name, we can tell that his name was flip-flopped when he got to Hawaii. His correct family name is Lee, but the Chinese practice of saying family name first confused a lot of record keepers in Hawaii. So flip-flopping names and taking on a new identity because of that happened a lot amongst the Chinese who immigrated at that time. To make things even more confusing, Ah was added to his given name of Lo or Look. Ah is a common prefix used in southern China to show familiarity or affection when addressing someone. So Ah just stuck on to his Chinese given name here in Hawaii. You'll notice that many Chinese Hawaiian families that trace their roots to this time period have names beginning with A, Akau, Akeo, Asam, Achang, Achi, Akaka, etc. Knowing the Chinese characters of all those names also helps confirm his relation to my grandmother. The character for his family name is at the top and is the same as the character for the plum, the item plum, the fruit plum. So the same plum character is on my grandmother's gravestone. It's the third character across from right to left. We know, because of that, we know that Ahlo and my grandmother are from the same family clan, even though we don't know how closely related they are. So let's take a look at Lahela's name now. Lahela's name also points to the kinds of identity changes that were taking place for Hawaiians during that time. Lahela means Rachel in Hawaiian. It's a biblical name from the Old Testament. You might have noticed that Kauhi is not on Lahela's gravestone. The name Kauhi is written in, so where did Kauhi come from? Gotta add that. The name Kauhi is written in as her father on her death certificate, which also tells us that Lahela was born in Ewa on the island of Oahu. Notice that her mother's maiden name is missing. So where does Kehuokalani come from? Well, that's hard to determine because Hawaiian names were also in flux at this time. About 8 years after Lahela was born, Kamehameha IV passed a naming law in 1860 in an effort to modernize the country. Previously, many Hawaiians identified themselves with only one name. The law mandated that everyone have two names. Your family name would be your father's name if you were legitimately born. If you were illegitimately born, your family name would be your mother's name. Your given or first name had to be a Christian name. I mean, this totally floored me when I learned this. When women married, they should take on their husband's name as their family's name. Well, Debbie and I have not found any ancestry records connected with the name Kehuokalani. So we theorize that that might have been Lahela's given name before she adopted a Christian name. Huo is an old Hawaiian name for one of the stars. So Kehuokalani can be translated as the star of the heavens. It's a beautiful name, but we still don't know if it's her mom's or hers. In any case, we can see that Lahela's identity is influenced by both old world Hawaiian practices and more modern ones. Now, I found out more about Lahela's father, Kauhi, by plugging his name into the Land Grant Records database, which is available for free on the Family Search website. I highlighted the entry for deeded land in Waiawa, Ewa, that was given to Mrs. L. Kehuokalani by Kauhi in 1884. Now, by noting the royal patent numbers or Kuleana numbers that are listed in the column towards the right, hopefully you can see that, probably can't, it's too small. But anyway, you can locate the corresponding plot of land by entering those numbers into the Kipuka database. This is what the Kipuka database homepage looks like. It's an amazing database. So when I did that, they show you the location of the exact location of the land plots. So these two lots owned by Kauhi are shown over today's landscape. So his property was on the other side of the freeway from Leeward Community College. And that area is in the Ahupua'a of Waiawa in the Moku of Ewa. That Waiawa is in the lime green highlight. The Kipuka database also shows original documents related to the parcel of land when it was first claimed. So the famous historian, John Papa'i, who is from Ewa, gives testimony here to show that Kauhi indeed lived and worked on this land. He tells us that the land claimants are brothers. We have two Kauhis here, brothers who claimed the land. They lived there since about 1831. A more current report here has an easier to read description of what the land consisted of. 3 taro lo'i, a pasture, and a house lot next to the Holoi Pia Pia stream. This 1900 photo of Waiʻava gives you an idea of what the land looked like when it was deeded to Lahela. Most likely, Lahela's father was a farmer. Now here's the marriage certificate that Debbie found. It confirms that Lahela was from Waiʻava. See the second entry there for June 22nd. Her husband Ahlo is the Pākē who lives at Peleula, Honolulu. Peleula is an old name for the area right around Nu'uanu and Veritania. We can also see that Mr. Lures witnessed the marriage. But what caused these two people to get married in the first place? You know, I always ask that question when I meet new couples, like, how did they get together anyhow, you know? So, I'll probably never know all the juicy details about how this couple met up, but I can guess some of the things that might have influenced both of them. Like most Hakka men in Hawaii, Ahlo came as a laborer from Canton or Guangzhou. He arrived in 1865 when he was about 24 years old. And he was the youngest son of a fortune teller. By his signature, which shows the number 6, he might have even been the 6th son of that fortune teller. He wasn't dirt poor, but he was not educated. So most likely he came to Hawaii in search of a better future. Now this chart shows demographics in Hawaii from 1820 to 1920. The red line marks the year 1865 when Ahlo arrives. Notice the Hawaiian population is shrinking at this time. And also that there are still relatively few Chinese here compared to later years. So for Ahlo and the other Chinese men who arrived at this time, lots of opportunities existed, and those opportunities expanded when they married a local woman. Now, from Lahela's point of view, these new Chinese arrivals, who are almost all men, added to the marriage pool. In fact, by the time Ahlo arrives, there are already a number of Chinese men married to Hawaiian women. And the Chinese men are gaining a reputation for being good catches. They are known to be good providers who take care of their families, including their in-laws. The other thing Ahlo had going for him was he could cook. Ahlo works as a cook for Robert Lures and his wife Catherine for 7 years in the 1860s and 70s. Lures is living in various cottages on Nu'uanu and Kukui streets, where the arrow shows you. He's an up-and-coming businessman, starting as a carpenter, then joining his cousin in a lumber business that would eventually become Lures and Cook. Ahlo must have learned how to entertain well while working for the Lures, because later on, Ahlo would be known around town as, quote unquote, the gourmet's friend. And invitations to his parties were very sought after. Ahlo must have always also met William Cooper Park here, because Parker Park lived on Kukui Street also. Park was a prominent marshal of Hawaii. He was in charge of maintaining law and order and worked under 5 different kings. Ahlo worked for him for a year. We don't know what exact job Ahlo had, but it must have given him great exposure to how the law worked in the Hawaiian kingdom. Over the years, Ahlo is in and out of court quite a bit. Park was also a Christian and ran a night school for Chinese. So perhaps he was one of Ahlo's teachers who taught him English and how to read and write. I gleaned that particular bit of information from reading the memoir of City Mills founder, CKIE. That is also listed in my document as one of the resources. A lot of wonderful information comes from memoirs. Now, it's through the Hawaiian language nūpepa that we learn of some important events in Ahlo's life after he marries Lahela. In 1878, he opens a general merchandise store called Waianuenue, which is also the name of Rainbow Falls, Water Rainbow. It's on Nu'uanu Street and Chaplain Lane, and that's where Mark's Garage is now, if you want to know, the landmark. It's a pretty central location, as we all know. From this ad, you can see that the store sells all kinds of elegant things. Now, here's a more elaborate ad for the store that appears in Ka nūpepa Kuokoa. The fine print at the bottom lists some of the wonderful things he is selling, like boots from England and new calico cloth. In the text, he speaks directly to the people of Ewa, or the people of the oysters, or literally in Hawaiian, the people of the sea creatures without a voice. He urges them to support his store because he has married one of their beloved children and indeed produced a grandchild with them. I really love this ad because it shows that Ahlo recognizes that one of the main resources he needs to cement his place in Hawaii, other than land and money, are relatives. Back then, the fact that Lahela was born in Ewa makes her related to everyone in Ewa. While researching this, I started to learn how powerful ʻOhana was in Hawaii at that time. And we still have that in Hawaii today. I'm not sure it was as strong as it was back then, but I think newcomers know that in order to get ahead in Hawaii, you gotta know people. So having relatives helps. Anyway, moving on. This article gives you an idea about how hard it is to translate nūpepa pages sometimes that are badly scanned. It's sort of like doing a Wordle puzzle for every fourth word. You have to kind of guess and poke it in and see if it works. And a lot of times what you think it is not it. It doesn't work in a sentence. But trust me, this article is about a joyous occasion. The birthday luau for Lee and Lahela's son, Anthony. It's described by the writer, He Puhalahua. He notes that the party is held at the home of the Honorable J. Kupau, where lots of people enjoy delicious food and drink. He ends by praying the child's life will be long and his parents will have another year like this. Now, there's a poetic phrase embedded in this article. Ua inua kena kapu'u ikawai akanaulu. The hill drank the water of the sudden downpour until quenched. This could refer to a parched throat being quenched by a lot of liquor, because he described a lot of liquor being there. But I interpreted it also to point to the long wait to celebrate the birth of a child. Anthony was born 4 years after the Ahlos married, and Ahlo's obituary indicates that he had 2 other sons that didn't survive. With their young son to provide for, the Ahlos continued to grow their stake in Hawaii. In 1878, Ahlo acquires a rice plantation in Ewa. This marks the beginning of a very active business in leasing, subleasing, buying, selling, and mortgaging land. This is just the first page of listings for Ahlo's land transactions from 1878 to the early 1880s. The Hawaii Land Grant Index has over 1,000 listings for El Ahlo from 1878 to 1903. Note that a number of those listings include his wife, Lahela. When Ahlo becomes a naturalized citizen of the Hawaiian Kingdom in 1885, he strengthens his political position in the islands. He can now vote, something that Lahela, being a woman, cannot do. Ahlo's naturalization testifies to a fairly liberal immigration policy in the Hawaiian Kingdom at this time. And it's really fascinating to browse the listings of naturalized citizens, which is also linked up in my timeline. There are hundreds of new Hawaiian citizens from China and a lot from the United States. There's also listings from practically every country in Europe, Chile, Bombay, and some countries that I really have never heard of before. I'm not a geography nut, but I'm like, what is that? Anyway, it's really interesting to contrast Lee Ahlo's life in the Kingdom of Hawaii to the experiences of Chinese immigrants in the United States. In the United States, the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act cemented anti-Chinese discrimination into law. Chinese laborers were not allowed into the country. Chinese immigrants in the country could not become citizens. They could not own land and they could not vote. The law was on the books in the US until 1943. Now, there was a great interest in Hawaii regarding America's Chinese Exclusion Act. My preliminary research into both English and Hawaiian language newspapers revealed extreme differences of opinion about whether the Chinese were good or bad for the Hawaiian Kingdom. Most of the English press thought they were terrible. They were going to ruin the country, take it over. But if you look at this chart again, you can see how the number of Chinese rose remarkably from the time Ahlo arrived in 1865 to 1882. This was mostly due to Hawaii's growing plantation economy and need for cheap labor. And this sudden growth caused a lot of tension here in Hawaii. Now, it would have been great to know what the Chinese in Hawaii thought about the Exclusion Act in America. But the 3 Chinese language newspapers that actively covered the news at that time were all destroyed in the 1900 Chinatown fire. So the Hawaiian language newspaper remained an important source for alternate views that differed from those published in the pro-American English language press. Now, 5 years after the US passes the Chinese Exclusion Act, a group of powerful pro-American lobbyists forced King Kalakaua to sign a new constitution that will give them much greater political and economic power. This is known as the Bayonet Constitution today, and the new group of laws disenfranchises many poor Hawaiians and prevents all Chinese from voting, even if they're naturalized citizens. At this same time, keeping my great-grandparents in mind, my great-grandfather Lee Ahlo, who was working as Ahlo's foreman in Kaneohe, marries my great-grandmother, who recently arrived from Hong Kong. I wonder if the growing anti-Chinese sentiment represented in the Bayonet Constitution is one of the reasons that Lahela insists the couple get married in a Christian church. Also right about this time, Ahlo and other prominent Chinese men start their own lobbying group, the United Chinese Society. It's formed to be a philanthropic mutual aid society, but it evolves into a powerful political voice, despite the fact that none of the members can vote in Hawaii elections. At the inaugural Chinese New Year's event held at their clubhouse on King Street, the Royal Hawaiian Band plays and Princess Liliuokalani attends. That's a sign that these Chinese men now wield some clout in Hawaii society. Note, I just found this photo online a couple of weeks ago. I'm still trying to identify these men, and I feel real certain that Ahlo is amongst them. He was one of the founding officers, and this was taken in the early days. He would have been about 47 years old. But I can't tell, I can't tell, like Chinese, you can't tell if they're really old or not, sometimes. I'm hoping that the United Chinese Society, who's helping sponsor this talk, Ivy's here, I'm hoping that they're gonna help me out, and, or maybe somebody who's listening sees this picture, so I know who those people are. Anyhow, yeah, please, I am so curious about what he looks like. So, a year after Kalakaua signs the Bayonet Constitution, legislators, this is where they met at the ʻOhana Hall. They proposed an anti-Chinese amendment for Hawai'i, an amendment to the already restrictive Bayonet Constitution. The amendment will severely limit Chinese immigration in Hawai'i and allow the legislature to restrict the kinds of jobs and the kinds of land Chinese can hold. Of course, the Chinese get very riled up about this amendment. They respond to holding a mass meeting at the Chinese Theater, pictured here. It was right on the waterfront. According to a report filed in the Honolulu Bulletin of August 1st, 1888, the building was jammed full, with not a foot of standing room. And there was a crush of people outside who couldn't gain entrance. Lee Ahlo is one of about 20 speakers who addressed the crowd, and all of the speeches are translated into English at the event. I think this was like for the press. No, they were very press savvy. Anyhow, the bulletin reporter sums up what they say. Some of us have been here more than 30 years. We pay taxes, duties, and rents. We want civil rights. Let us petition our country for protection. And if they will not assist us, we must help ourselves. We are over 20,000 strong. Let us unite and stand firm. Ahlo and several other Chinese merchants write an open letter to make their case. It's addressed to the legislature. Coincidentally, on the day it's published, the legislature agrees to table the amendment indefinitely by a vote of 25 to 17. This is surprising because there was a lot of debate about it before, and the legislature had been split pretty evenly. So the Chinese are saying, we got rid of that, but that's not the end of it. The Attorney General, Clarence Ashford, accuses Kaumoha of South Kona, these are two legislators, and Kauhi of Ewa for taking $50 bribes from Chinese merchants in exchange for their votes. Now, this Kauhi is Ana Kalea Kauhi, who was born in 1839. He's too young to be Lahela's father, but I bet you anything he's related to her in some way. The papers are full of gossip about the bribery scandal, including blow-by-blow testimony that names Ahlo's store as one of the places legislators go to get paid off. Kauhi is identified as the person distributing the envelopes of money to the others. Ahlo is careful not to implicate anyone with his own testimony. Regardless, Kauhi and Kaumoha are expelled from the legislature. Kauhi, though, gets himself reelected to the legislature the very next year, voted in by the good people of Ewa and Waianae. And he remained in office until the overthrow. Now, jumping ahead to 1889, Ahlo's store is a center of controversy again. This year, a group of 150 political activists led by Robert Wilcox staged an armed insurrection. Their aim is to get Kalakaua to abandon the new constitution in favor of the old one. It's a short-lived battle, but 7 insurrectionists die. And Ahlo's store is one of the places where they got their guns. Ahlo is arrested 2 months later for conspiracy. His arrest happens right before the trial of Wilcox and a Chinese reporter named Ho Fong. In those trials, witnesses testify that Ahlo was at 2 planning meetings held by Wilcox. An all-native jury acquits Wilcox, but Ho Fong is found guilty and imprisoned. Ahlo's trial is postponed a couple of times, and I'm not sure if he is ever officially tried. I've looked in the papers, but not the legal. places. Anyhow, the charges against Ahlo do not prevent him from leasing 216 acres of crown lands in Kaneohe just 1 year later, in January of 1891. The land is where Ahlo builds his rice mill. You see, it's the yellow little marker there. And that's where my great-grandparents raised their growing family. A few weeks after Ahlo signs that lease to his Kaneohe rice mill lands, King Kalakaua dies in a San Francisco hotel room after suffering a stroke. His body is brought back to Hawaii. He lays in state at Iolani Palace in the throne room. Before his funeral procession, all the elite and high-ranking government officials gather there to pay their respects. Among them is Kauhi from Ewa. Kalakaua was a popular king, and over 10,000 people attend the funeral procession for him. After leaving the palace, they march west on King Street, then turn north up Nu'uanu, headed for the royal mausoleum at Mana'ala. They march right past Lee Ahlo's store and home, where he lives with Lahela and 15-year-old Anthony on the second floor. Anthony is now studying at Oahu College, better known today as Punahou. Perhaps my great-grandparents traveled over the Puli to watch the proceedings. My great-grandmother would have been 5 months pregnant with her second child. If the baby is another girl, she's promised to give it to Lahela. 4 months later, when the baby girl arrives, one of her eyes is closed, and Lahela decides to wait for the next one. At the palace, Lee Ahlo is now on the throne, and a few legislators like Kauhi continue to press her to enact a new, more equitable constitution. The Chinese are also anxious for change and hoping she will bring it. In January 1892, 1 year after Kalakaua dies, Lee Ahlo sues in the Supreme Court of Hawaii to get his voting rights back. He represents approximately 600 naturalized Chinese men who lost their voting rights under the Bayonet Constitution. I actually counted them and I minused 20%. I don't know if that's kosher, but that's how I got 600. Hawaiian nūpepa, Hawaii Holomua, summarizes Ahlo's case. They say he is a citizen and he can read and write Hawaiian. Those were two of the requirements for voting under the current constitution. The Holomua also predicts in the English section of their paper that if the Chinese get the vote, they will all vote for the Liberal Party, run by Bush and Wilcox. For me, it's interesting to note that this Hawaii nationalist paper is monitoring the Chinese news at the time. The three Supreme Court justices who hear the case, Sanford Dole, Albert Judd, and Richard Bickerton, all rule against Ahlo. They refuse to give grandfathering rights to Chinese voters under this new constitution. Looking back, it seems like the writing was on the wall. 1 year after Ahlo loses his case, the Committee of Safety, quote unquote, stages an illegal coup on January 17, 1893. They imprisoned the Queen in her own palace. It must have been they must have been so like dejected and depressed when this happened. But the Ahlo family, like many other families in Hawaii, keep soldiering on. While the Queen appeals to the US President, Cleveland, to do the right thing and restore her kingdom, Lahela grows her family. The Ahlo's Hanai, my great-grandparents' third daughter, Lizzie, was born May 5th, 1895. They also Hanai a girl named Amoy Veronica, who is 9 years older than Lizzie. Lee Ahlo invests in more land and looks to start new businesses, including a coffee shop at Kalapapa. Anthony Kamalabalu Alo graduates from Oahu College and gives a commencement speech about the Chinese Empire and the excellent outlook in that country. Soon after, he leaves Hawaii to go to Cambridge University in England. And on his journey across the United States, he rides on the same train as the overthrown queen, Lee Ahlo. The queen invites Anthony to visit her in her car and asks him and his fellow students to play Hawaiian music for her. Their singing must have been a welcome reminder of home. Because at this point, the queen has already been in the United States for 8 long months, working to have her kingdom restored. She's on her way back to Washington, D.C. from San Francisco to protest against McKinley's plans to annex Hawaii. Back home, a women's patriotic group raises money to support her. They call themselves Hui Aloha Aina Nabahine. Besides raising money, the group collects signatures around the islands to show U.S. Congress that people in Hawaii do not want annexation. They collect thousands of signatures. This Kue petition is very famous, and you can buy a book showing all the signatures. Well, Lahela, who's 45 years old, signed this petition on September 11th, 1897. Her signature is on the left towards the bottom. I highlighted it there. But besides raising money, I'm sorry. From an article in Kealoha Aina, we know that Lahela does a lot more for the cause than just sign the petition. She works on the committee of the board to gather money and goods from her mama in Waianae for a big fundraising luau. And you can see my translation of what she collected. Now, this is the only mention that I have found so far for Lahela's mother. And I'm hoping that somebody in Hawaiian is going to say, oh, I know who that is. But yeah, please. I ask sometimes and things happen. Anyway, in the same edition of the paper, a much bigger article describes lavish feasts that the committee puts together to raise money. The money is to support their delegates in Washington, D.C., who are campaigning against annexation to support the Queen. There's a wonderful description of this party, and I include a link to that translation. It was done by Hina Nubel, who works for Awaiʻulu, this wonderful organization that is working on translating nūpepa. Now, Lahela is in charge of one of the 7 big tables of Hawaiian food, where she assembles all the bounty that she collected from her mother. But their efforts are for naught. On July 7th, 1898, President William McKinley signed the Newlands Resolution, formally annexing Hawaii to the United States. The English language papers appeared jubilant, but most Native Hawaiian and Chinese are devastated. Lahela and leaders of the Women's Patriotic League published an open letter to the President, the Congress, and the people of the United States, which appears in both the English language and Hawaiian language newspapers. They speak for 20,000 Hawaiian women, and they point out that the 1893 takeover was illegal. They asked for 3 things. 1, that the question of annexation should be given the vote in Hawaii to all legal voters registered at the time of the takeover. That if the majority is against annexation, the people of the Hawaiian nations should select their own constitution. And 3, if annexation is irrevocable without any appeal to the people, we, the women of the Hawaiian Islands, do humbly and earnestly ask the people of the United States of America, whose government is conducted for the people and by the people, that in the new laws to be enacted for our country by the United States Congress, our fathers, brothers, and husbands be granted the full rights of American citizenship. Now for Lahela, this plea resounds loudly. She and her husband and the rest of their family have a lot to lose if Ahlo is classified as a Chinese immigrant under the US anti-Chinese laws. So how will the United States classify the people in their new territory? That question is still up in the air at the end of 1899 when the first case of bubonic plague hits Hawaii on December 12th. Over the next couple of weeks, the deadly disease spreads. Health officials find more cases in Chinatown, including on ʻOhana Street across from one of Ahlo's commercial buildings. Board of Health officials decide to burn that whole ʻOhana block on the east side. It's a drastic move compared to the more cautious approach of condemning buildings until the disease passes. Pictured here is one of the buildings targeted to be burnt first, with the men who ordered the burning standing in front of it. The guy on the far left, the dark suit, is C.B. Wood, president of the Board of Health. The guy in the white suit is Henry E. Cooper, Attorney General of this new U.S. territory. The ʻOhana block they burn contains many thriving businesses. Several tailors, a dress shop, a watchmaker, a shoe store, and a photographic gallery that is on the second floor of the building with the big sign that says Hale Pa'iki'i Emiloa, or House of Photographs, very cheap. I'm particularly sad about the loss of this photograph. Of course, there was no time to save photographs or negatives. And I imagine that images of Lahela and Lee Ahlo were among them. As doctors report more plague cases, the board orders more fires. They give residents very little advance notice before forcing them to evacuate, and families cannot take much with them to the crowded refugee camps that are hastily put together. On January 11th, Lee and Lahela's main store and living quarters are targeted for burning. On Sunday, January 14th, fire destroys their home and store within 1 hour. The board forces Lahela and her 2 young daughters to quarantine at a refugee camp out in Kaka'ako. Lee Ahlo must have been separated from them when the area was quarantined off, because a day after his house is burned, he's allowed to attend a big citizens meeting held by the Board of Health at the Legislative Hall. And he writes to the board, pleading that they allow him to remove his family from the crowded refugee camp. He offers to build a cottage at his own expense where they can be quarantined in more comfort. The Board of Health delays their decision, and a couple of days later, they deny his petition in favor of relocating his family to another camp in Kalihi, which is under construction. The following day, the Board of Health sets another fire on ʻOhana Street, this time further north on Beretania. That fire gets blown out of control. It begins to burn Kamokapili Hawaiian Church on Beretania Street. It rapidly spreads south and westward until it consumes almost all the rest of Chinatown. The fire burns for 17 days. It destroys 38 acres and over 4,000 homes. I can't imagine what Lee and Lahela and their young girls must be feeling at this time. The blow-by-blow, fact-based reporting in the English language press is from outsiders' perspectives. But in the nūpepa Ke Aloha Aina, I found an editorial published by Emma Navahi that speaks with emotion about the great loss the burning of Chinatown represents. Emma Navahi is half Chinese herself and the wife of famous Hawaiian patriot Joseph Navahi. She criticizes the Board of Health for their inhumane treatment of Hawaiian, Chinese, and Japanese living in Chinatown, and points out that the home of a Hawai'i woman who died of the plague was not burned, and her family were not forced into camps like Lahela and other upstanding citizens. I haven't had time to accurately translate the full editorial, but I wanted to share one paragraph that was particularly moving to me. This is how it starts off in Hawaiian. Uohala analo loa akula o Honolulu kahiko. This is my English translation. Old Honolulu is gone and completely disappeared. Namely, Kamanu Vai, Kamo Kapili, Kakihale Ua Po'o Kamika, Paina Akale, Kapu'u, Okolu, and some other districts within those areas. Places where some Hawaiians themselves were born from the womb of their mothers, where they walked in the days of their youth until they were an old man or woman. Now they are destitute, homeless, and very impoverished into the far future because of the punishing burning of their homes by the government. Gone are all the old houses searched for by the husband, the wife, and the children. Gone are all the wooden calabashes inherited from the ancestors. The hand-polished coconut shell bowls and the spirits that dwell in them. All of you will never see those things again when your quarantine exile ends under the Board of Health, representing our current government. In fact, Lee and Lahela's lives will never be the same after the fire. Lee Ahlo quickly built a big new home on land he acquired on Lahela Street, near where St. Francis Hospital is today. Anthony graduates from Cambridge, and when he brings his new English wife home, the Ahlos throw a big party. All the papers write about it. But Anthony also urges his father to invest money in a seafaring expedition to the Marcus Islands, where lots of guano can be harvested. Perhaps in an effort to recoup his Chinatown losses, Ahlo makes the rash decision to put all of his money into this expedition. The islands turn out to be occupied by hostile Japanese fishermen, and the expedition has to return to Hawaii empty-handed. Lee Ahlo takes a dead loss. He falls ill in 1904 and passes away in 1906. Almost all of the land holdings he had returned to their original owners or are mortgaged off. Lahela continued living in the Liliha house for 5 more years, but she gets sick and dies in 1911. Now, we can look at this as a tragic rags to riches to rags story. But the family that Lee and Lahela worked so hard to build continued to branch out and thrive. Anthony became a justice in the Supreme Court of Beijing, China in 1908. He was named Chinese Consul of Samoa and Borneo in the 1920s. He and his English wife, Gladys Fitzgerald, had one son that survived into adulthood, Anthony Ka'apolu Lee Ahlo Jr. One of Junior's descendants recently contacted Debbie through Find a Grave. So we know that his line lives on. The Ahlo's Hanai daughters, Elizabeth and Amoy Victoria, also married and had children. Amoy Victoria married Henry Espinda and had 5 children with him. The oldest one, Dorothy Espinda, married a poi poi. Debbie is descended from her and has been active in recovering both Lee and Lahela's stories. My Auntie Lizzie married a handsome Hawaiian Chinese man named Abraham Akau. They had 18 children together. The Lee family that Ahlo and Lahela helped to establish in Kaneohe grew too. My great-grandparents had 12 children, including Lizzie, 6 boys and 6 girls. This photo was taken before the youngest was born. All the Lee children remained in Hawaii and had families of their own. Lahela would be pleased that my grandmother, Polly, the one she rejected, settled in the Moku of Eba, the land of her father. Lee Ahlo would be pleased that Polly married a Hakka man like him. His name was Den Loi Ching, and he knew how to plant rice, among other things. He also was a great cook. Polly and Den Loi settled at Hawaiʻi on the shores of Pu'uloa at the west lock of Pearl Harbor, just a couple of ahupua'a over from Waiaba, where Lahela was born. Polly and Den Loi raised 10 children on their farm at Hawaiʻi. The youngest one was my mother, Ruth. She's standing here behind her dog, Brownie. Here are just some of the Ching descendants that came from Polly and Den Loi. But Lee and Lahela's legacy goes beyond just family. Because for me, they left their story. And finding that story over these past few years has deepened and broadened my feelings for this place, for Hawai'i name. I will be forever grateful to them for that. I'm also grateful that this journey has included learning Olelo Hawai'i, because learning the language has been a big part of my deeper appreciation for my homeland and the people who live in it. Mahalo nui loa to all my kumu Olelo Hawai'i out there, if you're out there doing that, or if you're gonna watch this later. I owe you a lot. And I also owe a lot to all of you out in the audience in Zoom land and here. Just because your participation is helping this story grow and live on into the future. And again, I hope that some of you will contact me to help me answer some of my remaining questions, a lot of my remaining questions about this couple, including finding photographs of them. So this is a reminder, this is the QR code that leads to the resource document that has readings and my email address and my link to my working timeline. So if you have trouble with this, can't get the document, I think that the Center for Chinese Studies will make sure that you get it. So you can contact them if you have trouble. So I am now going to hand the microphone over to Shauna Brown, and we are going to get to hear from our discussants, and I'm really anxious to hear what they have to say and learn from their insights.
Mahalo nui, Robin. That was just such a beautiful presentation, really fascinating research. Again, as a historian, I am just so much admiration for Robin and everything she does with her work, as well as her wonderful command of language and story. Really terrific. And a note to our audience members who are watching via Zoom that we do have a Q&A feature on the Zoom. So please be sure to add any questions or comments. So when we do open up for more general comments and questions, we can be sure to include what you would like to hear from Robin. And now it's my honor to introduce our two discussants. Our first discussant today is actually joining us from California. That's Dr. Ming Zhou. Dr. Zhou is an academician of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She is currently Distinguished Professor of Sociology and Asian American Studies and Director of the Asia Pacific Center at the University of California, Los Angeles. Her main research areas are in migration and development, race and ethnicity, Chinese diasporas, the sociology of Asia and Asian America, and urban sociology, and she has published widely in these areas. She is recognized as one of the world's top 2% of scientists in Stanford University's prestigious global ranking. Thank you very much, Dr. Joe, for joining us today, and we look forward to your comments and discussion. Thank you.
Am I on?
Yes, you're on. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shannon Brown, for your kind introduction. And aloha, and good afternoon, everybody. Big thanks to Professor Bao Yan Cheng for inviting me to this meaningful event. And I also thank Dr. Ni Zhang and the dedicated team at the Center for Chinese Studies for doing all the hard work to make this event possible. And of course, Robin, thank you for such a remarkable presentation and for sharing your research on Chinese Hawaiian families and their contributions to Hawaiian history and society. When I received Professor Cheng's invitation to serve as a discussant for Robin's talk, I accepted it immediately and with great enthusiasm. The theme of this event resonates deeply with me, not only as an immigrant from Zhongshan, but also as a scholar of Chinese immigration and diaspora communities. As Robin reminds us, many of the earliest generations of Chinese immigrants to Hawaii came from the Canton area, in particular, came from Zhongshan, a region in South China connected to Macau by land and only an hour boat ride away from Hong Kong. Before the waves of contemporary Chinese immigration to the United States in the late 1970s, nearly 3/4 of Hawaiians Chinese traced their ancestral roots to Zhongshan. I myself am an immigrant from Zhongshan. I was born and raised in Zhongshan, and I migrated to the United States in 1984. Growing up, the word Hawaii, in Cantonese, Hawai'i, so it's the same. And it's Seki dialect. Hawaii is always familiar to me. My grandmother often told bedtime stories about uncles from her village who had journeyed to Hawaii in search of fortune. Those tales left a lasting impression on me. My first visit to Honolulu was in 1998 when I attended the Association for Asian American Studies annual conference. I was astonished to hear Seki dialect spoken throughout Honolulu's Chinatown, and I speak Seki dialect. I was even more surprising was the meeting of Professor Franklin Ng. Franklin is like Robin, a 4th-generation Chinese who was born and raised in Hawaii. And Professor Ng taught at Cal State Fresno. He told me that he could speak fluent Chinese. So I started to speak Chinese with him. Mandarin, no. Cantonese, no. But Seki dialect. So I end up speaking Seki with him. So that was a very surprising and also a very endearing experience to me, finding my country folk in a place where everybody speaks the same dialect. There is also a profound historical connection between Zhongshan and Hawaii through Sun Mi. So here is Sun Mi is Dr. Sun Yat-sen's brother. And then actually people call him Ami. So is like Ahlo, like Lee Ahlo. So Sun Mi is the elder brother of Sun Yat-sen, who was known as the father of modern China, who led the revolution to overthrow the Qing dynasty in 1911. Sanmi migrated to Hawaii in 1881, first as a farmer and then as a businessman, and eventually as a successful sugar plantation owner in Maui. He played a pivotal role in supporting his brother Sun Yat-sen's education and later revolutionary activities, both financially and politically, through his ties to Hawaii's Chinese community. This trans-Pacific network illustrates how migration from Zhongshan was never solely about economic survival. It was also about shaping political destinies and forging global connections between China and the rest of the world. For me, as someone who shares this regional origin, these stories are profoundly personal, including the story told by Robin. They remind us that the history of Chinese in Hawaii is not only about migration and resettlement, but also about the powerful role diasporic communities have played in transforming the course of modern Chinese history. Of course, what I share reflects my perspective as an immigrant from Zhongshan. Robin, however, offers another side of the story. Pākē ʻOhana, the Chinese Hawaiian families and their contribution to Hawaii. So throughout Robin's work, she revealed a different dimension of the migration journey, what Chinese immigrants built, how they became part of Hawaiian society, and how this untold history is uncovered through meticulous research in primary sources, including newspapers, historical documents, and archival materials in both English and, more important, in Hawaiian languages. As a scholar of Chinese immigration and diaspora communities, I would like to highlight a few points that Robin's taught that resonated deeply with me. First, the question, what's in a name? So she explained a lot on that, but I would like to share my take on the question. The photo of the prominent figure in Hawaii's Chinese community, Lee Ahlo's tombstone, together with his legal documents, like his marriage certificate and birth certificate, and newspaper reports, reminded me of the strange and often absurd experiences many Chinese immigrants face in North America, which were consequential for the immigrant family. The name Lee Ahlo in Chinese is actually Lee Lo. Lei Lo. Lo is the number 6. So adding R before Lo is a common Cantonese expression of affection, a nickname used by family and close friends. For example, my given name is Min, and within my family and among close friends, I'm often called Amin. For many early Chinese immigrants, however, family names were frequently lost upon arrival in the United States, and they had little power to correct the record. The first issue lies in the order of the name. In Chinese, the family name comes first, but in English, it comes last. When immigrants told officials their name, they naturally follow Chinese convention. U.S. immigration officers rarely ask for clarification, and as a result, family names were often misplaced or erased in English records. There is also a cultural dimension. In Cantonese, reversing the order of a name carries a negative connotation. It can even be used as a form of swearing. I recall when I first arrived in the United States, people call me Min Zhou. So that's the correct order of the spelling in English, but it doesn't sound right as it is, right? So to me, it sounded odd and very uncomfortable. I asked people then to call me Zhou Min or Ah Min or Sin Ah, because Min simply mean alone is too intimate in my own language. Yet over time, I gave up, resisting, fearing that my family name might disappear altogether if I refuse assimilation. So in earlier generations, many immigrants had no say in how their names were recorded, and misspellings and misrepresentations became permanent, passed down to later generations. In the case of Lee Ahlo, treating Lee as a given name effectively erased his family name. Newspaper records even abbreviated his name as L. Ahlo, so reinforcing the idea that Ahlo, not Lee, was the surname. Another striking example is the renowned Chinese community historian Kim Mak-lai, who is also a fourth-generation Chinese American born and raised in San Francisco. Few realized that Mak was actually his family name. In English, however, it was completely lost for him and his descendants. So his name now is Kim Mak-lai. So Mak is the middle name. So neither the first nor the last is his family name. Okay, the loss of family names was also closely tied to another phenomenon in Chinese immigration history, that is the paper son. Paper sons were individuals who entered the United States using forgery documents that claimed they were children of Chinese Americans legally residing in the country. This practice emerged as a creative form of resistance to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 that Robin had mentioned, which barred most Chinese laborers from migrating from the United States. At Angel Island immigration station, Chinese immigrants were detained, subjected to lengthy interrogations, sometimes lasting weeks and even years. Officials asked detailed questions about family histories, village layouts, household routines in an effort to expose inconsistencies. To pass these examinations, paper sons had to memorize and elaborate false identities. And these false identities and, of course, the false family names become lost in the process. As a result, family names were often altered and or lost entirely. Many immigrants adopted the surname of a paper father, erasing their original lineage in official records. This compounded confusion already caused by differences between English and Chinese naming conventions, making it difficult for descendants to trace their true ancestry. Families live in with the constant fear of exposure, and children grew up knowing their legal name did not match their true heritage. So under the Chinese exclusion, many families actually live in fear. Yet the paper son practice also represent resilience. It was actually a way for Chinese immigrants to circumvent unjust laws, build new lives, and sustain their communities despite exclusionary policies. In this way, the paper son phenomenon reflects both the vulnerability and ingenuity of the Chinese diaspora, leaving a lasting imprint on family names and identities in America. So in the interest of time, I would like to briefly make two additional comments. First, the Pākē ʻOhana, Chinese Hawaiian families. Because of Chinese exclusion laws and the cultural convention in China of men leaving to seek fortune while women remain behind, many Chinese American families develop what scholars call the split household pattern. Married couples separated across the ocean for years at a time. My own family was one such example. My grandmother stayed in Zhongshan while my grandfather, whom I never met, lived and worked in Peru. He returned only occasionally, and after World War II, he came home permanently, determined to die in his native village, like falling leaves returning to their roots. So he was one of the lucky ones who did not, who were able to die back in their home village, whereas like Lee Ahlo, he died in the foreign land. So in Chinese culture, like your soul never can find your home if you got buried in a foreign land. And there are many in the Chinese diaspora who had experienced it. So on the US mainland, miscegenation laws prohibited Chinese men from marrying local women, reinforcing the split household pattern. Hawaii, however, was an exception. The Pākē ʻOhana reflects the reality of Chinese men marrying Hawaiian women, a result of restrictive immigration laws that limited the arrival of Chinese women, but did not impose the same barrier to intermarriage. These unions created a distinct identity that complicates simple narratives of either Chinese or Hawaiian history. Their children inherited dual legacies, navigating and negotiating both ancestries, and in doing so, they embody the creative possibilities of diaspora life. Second point is the power of primary sources. Robin's use of Hawaiian language newspapers and other archival materials is commendable. These sources matter because they prove that Chinese immigrants were not isolated outsiders. They were active participants in Hawaiian social, cultural, and political life. To deepen this work, we must also recover Chinese language sources, especially those written with Cantonese sensibilities, which can reveal perspectives often absent in English language account, and even in Mandarin, in Chinese, the official Chinese account, which can reveal perspective often together. This primary material allow us to reconstruct a fuller, more nuanced history, one that challenge Western-centric narratives and restore the voices of those who live it. To conclude, Robin Lung's focus on the Lee Ahlo family moves beyond abstract history into a deeply personal human story. It reminds us that behind every name and every document lies sacrifice, resilience, and the wavering together of lives across oceans. The economic sacrifices my grandmother witnessed in Zhongshan form the foundation of the complex of Chinese immigrant families that Robin documents in Hawaii. In summary, Pākē ʻOhana teaches us that immigration is not only about displacement or relocation, it is also about rebirth, creation, and the forging of new identities. And it challenges us to continue seeking out primary sources, especially those marginalized or written in different languages, so we may understand the true texture of history in all its richness. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joe Mahalo nui, for those wonderful comments. Very interesting, and we really appreciate your views on Robin's project, as well as the importance of our project to the history of Chinese migration. And now I would like to introduce our next discussant. It's a great honor to introduce Professor Jonathan Osorio. Professor Osorio has been on the faculty of the Lahela Kehuokalani Center for Hawaiian Studies since 1993 and served as its director from 2003 to 2008. He has designed and taught classes in history, law, and culture, music as historical texts, Hawaiian literature, and research methodologies for and from Indigenous peoples. He is a composer and singer with a history as a Hawaiian music recording artist since 1975. Since May 2018, he has been serving as the Dean of Hawaii Nui Akea School of Hawaiian Knowledge at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And also Professor Osorio obtained his PhD, his master's degree, and his bachelor's degree, all from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Aloha kako.
Hello.
It's really difficult to know how to follow up on first the amazing presentation you made, which I had no idea really how this story was going to unfold, even after the time that we spent together in that fellowship. And I want to really talk about the enormity of what you've done and the technique and the significance of what you have done for telling stories. And so I'm just going to make a couple of points, and then we can get on to a general conversation on this. The first point that I want to make is the idea that there are so many hidden stories, so many hidden mo'olelo because they are not necessarily shared from generation to generation. Because at least in the past, official kinds of media, particularly the kinds of things that extol the lives of great men and great women, don't really focus and shine on people who live our kinds of lives, ordinary lives, lives of struggle, that these stories are so important because they verify actually the larger narratives that as historians, we uncover. The story of your ancestors are really nested in the story that I've devoted my life to, which is an understanding of how our history in Hawaii has unfolded. The lives they led are intimately connected to the kinds of oppressions and suppressions that my own people endured at the hands of a particular group of foreigners who arrived here and really began that mechanism that in part drew all of those people from China, from Japan, from the Philippines that make up our families. So I want to say a few words about that structure that's created by the sugar companies, beginning in the 1850s, and the process by which that sugar industry grew, not only by their ability to obtain land cheaply in the Hawaiian Islands, in part because our own population of Kanaka Maoli was plunging so precipitously in this period. The industry could never have been based on Hawaiian labor. The demographics of Hawaiian men and women was going like this, and the needs of the industry were trending upward. And the decision to bring in immigrant labor on contracts was something that was sold to our government, to our chiefs and to the king in the 1850s as a way, they said, of bringing in cognate races, a race of men that would reinvigorate the population. Hawaiian men and women were dying of diseases that were introduced since the time of Cook. The way to reverse this, it was sold to us, was to bring in people who were hardier, peasant people from China. Yes. People who were accustomed to hard labor, and clearly our people, we were giving up. I want to talk about this because it's a really important part of the discourse that convinces the kingdom government that it should engage in this contract labor. And within the contract, it made the kingdom of Hawaii actually responsible for the people we brought in. In actuality, the conduct toward immigrant labor was left to the plantation owners and managers. The kingdom was legally liable, and yet in issues of punishment and the way the contract was unfolded, not just the pay, which was specified by the contract, but the benefits that went along with it, supposedly housing and a plot of land to grow your vegetables, all of those things were pretty much at the mercy of the sugar companies themselves. And as a number of historians have pointed out, those things were never managed particularly closely. And really, the plantations got away with a great deal of cost-saving devices, certainly over the next 30 years. I want to be really clear that the oppression of immigrant labor in Hawaii was both the responsibility of the kingdom government, which was run by Hawaiians, at least initially, but was also the responsibility of the companies who really enjoyed their very, very inexpensive labor and made money from this. And that at certain points of time in the kingdom, the government paid attention. So the other part of this is this really, really powerful discourse on race that, speaking as a Hawaiian historian, has always been, a kind of powerful incentive to know more about this past, particularly now in this moment when we face similar kinds of arguments being leveled at all sorts of people in the United States and by the government itself. So actually, I'm going to read these are a couple of excerpts from actually one newspaper article in the 1870s. This was the editor of this editorial was a missionary named Henry Sheldon, and he's writing about Chinese labor in the 1870s. Now, at this point, there are thousands of Chinese in the kingdom, and a great many of them have already exceeded their contract, which were usually, 5 years. Once their contract was done, Chinese really had the option of returning to China if they have money, or staying and opening up businesses and going into other kinds of trades. As this happened, it created a kind of problem for this rather small white community in Hawaii. And I want to say that at this point in the 1870s, Chinese already outnumbered the Europeans and Americans. And as they begin to go into trades that competed with what many white people thought were their jobs, blacksmith, shopkeepers, and shop owners, the older discourse that this race would come in and reinvigorate Hawaiians and create large families, it turns into really disturbing things like this. In their theft of trades and their cheaper working of the same, they cannot compete with men who require for food only a pound of rice and perhaps a rat per diem, which costs but a few cents, when they themselves, we're talking about white people, when they themselves require many times that amount to maintain. In the very same article, what was once seen as a benefit of the introduction of Chinese into Hawaii, which is that they might mate with Hawaiian women and create stronger, family. Speaking of the Chinese here, their natural unchastity and the habits of social and physical ruin they are everywhere introducing among the women of Hawaii, with whom alone, for the mere gratification of imperative animalism, they seek to mate. These kinds of exhortations were a bit extreme, even in this particular time in Hawaii, and yet they really do mark how facile and flexible the way we construct race, or the way that race is constructed, in order to meet certain kinds of economic needs. I wanted to make that point because your story really does illustrate this. This family, this bringing together of, and it's really not even as important that it also involves a Hawaiian family or Hawaiian families. It's that this family trying to live in this place, trying to take its place in a community that actually is on the ground level welcoming of these newcomers, that intermarries with them, to the extent that by the 20th century, by the early 20th century, by the 1920s and 1930s, the multi-ethnic population of Hawaii is skyrocketing, and it's growing very, very, very quickly. It is a remarkable thing in the story of America, of the American, nation in the 1920s and 30s, so much so that sociologists are writing about this all the time. This rainbow race, they call us, this incredible melding of different cultures and languages, and the fact that there seems to be so little bigotry, well, except for the things that were being written in newspapers in the 1870s. So that was a story I wanted to make sure that we understood the kinds of real strange ways in which our names were displaced. These things happened to Hawaiian families as well, especially after 1900, especially after the American takeover, where the English standard system was extended over all of the public schools, where prior to that, there were Hawaiian language schools, schools in the Hawaiian language, schools in the English language, and Hawaiians went from one to the other without any particular problem. After 1900, the rule was only English was spoken on the grounds of the schools. Children's names, whether they were Chinese, Japanese, or Hawaiian, were often changed, made simple for people who were not accustomed to hearing those names. All of us went through those kinds of oppressions. And what I find remarkable is that we actually survived this, and that we thrive today. In many ways, we thrive with a sense of pride that we have lived through this, and that we have forged family relationships across so many different ethnicities here. People, I think, oversimplify this by calling it the aloha spirit, or even oversimplify it by saying that this was something that was that exists because of Hawaiians. It exists for many reasons, and it exists in part, I think, in response to that oppression. The oppression was real. It was exploited, and it was naked exploitation. But what I think it proved to all of us is that we are bigger than that story. The last thing I'm going to say, and this is just really not an attempt to be cute at all. I remember watching the movie Forrest Gump. Oh, remember that? And Forrest Gump is the story of this strange little individual who lived through all of these and had like crucial relationships to all of these major events in the lives of people like me who grew up in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And I always thought that was an interesting way to tell the story of America in this period of time. You've done the same thing here. You've actually made this whole story, and it's not just about the bayonet constitution and its oppression of, Native Hawaiian and Chinese and other, non-whites who were excluded from the votes in 1887. Not just that constitution, not just the overthrow, but the fire. All of these things that touch the lives of this remarkable family. And by hearing the story, and by understanding that these historical events are they're not just words in a book, they're not just things that we can sort of dismiss as things in the past. They are connected to us. They are connected to us spiritually and physically, viscerally, because they happened in our families. And what we go through these days, what we do to combat really the emergence of this new and virulent racism in America, what we do as a people today will be described, discussed, hopefully not mourned by the people who come after us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Osoya. Those were really wonderful and important comments, and really help us to really, open up the conversation to some really interesting just really important historical perspectives. I'm going to ask Robin to maybe give us a couple of comments in response to these two wonderful, discussants, and then we have time for just a couple of questions, either from our audience members here with us in person. Or again, if there are folks on Zoom who want to ask some questions, we do have the Q&A feature open, so please go ahead and give us your comments there. Robin, would you just like to respond? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jonathan and Joe. I learned so much. I mean, I wish we could go back and do our year fellowship again because there's so much to talk about. I couldn't help comparing, as Jonathan said, what happened to Lee Ahlo and Lahela and what's going on now, and I'm thinking that things like that could happen again in our current country, and that that the past did come alive for me. I mean, I've studied a lot of the Hawaiian history over the years through my films, and really, I never even thought, how did the Chinatown fire happen, until I knew that they were living there, and that their family, that my Auntie Lizzie was 5 years old and had to suffer through that. So all of these things really came to life for me in such a visceral way, as you say. And the overthrow became a personal thing, knowing that Lahela fought for the queen and raised money and had her mother collect pigs for the feast. I mean, it just brought that event so much more to life for me, and also made me realize that I was connected to it. I actually made a movie about Queen Lee Ahlo, and I empathized with her, but I never thought my family was connected in any way. I thought we were poor farmers. we didn't delve in politics, and I realized everyone is affected by politics, from the farmer to the legislators. So, and it's still the same today, and I was naive to think that my family didn't care or wasn't connected to the overthrow of the queen and the ending of the kingdom. So, and also Minsho, I love getting the perspective of the idea that people in China were hearing stories from about their uncles visiting Hawaii, because that also brings a whole new slant to Lee and Lahela's story. And anyway, we're running out of time. I want to open it up to questions. So if anyone has any out in the audience or in Zoom land. Yes, right.
Actually more of an announcement, but playing off of what Professor Osorio said and you said, the United States Supreme Court today approved the redistricting in Texas on racist grounds to be able to assure white majority in Texas. That went through today, is identical to what happened with the Constitution and everything else. So we are very definitely looking at past and present being the same moment.
Thank you. There was a comment about redistricting in the continental US of congressional districts and the historical relevancy of that, given Robin's presentation. So thank you. Any comments, Robin? Yeah.
It's just like, I'm just thinking, feeling that's
Yeah.
all my stomach. Is there anybody in Zoom?
We did have a question on Zoom asking about the impact of Chinese immigrants to Hawaii, particularly in the field of agriculture, and kind of maybe if you might have come across anything that might have surprised you about the agricultural work that your family or other.
Well, I think a great book to read is Kaneohe. The land and time of change, I think it's called, or something like that. The land and water study that Marion Kelly helped to write, because you see that districts like Kaneohe, which was one of the bread baskets of Oahu, that the transformation of the use of land and water is directly connected to the loss of Hawaiian lives. I mean, the Kaneohe had abandoned taro fields because people were dead. And many of those taro lo'i were leased to Chinese to take over as rice plantations, and they transformed to rice plantations. And so agriculturally, that to me opened up a lot of, or made me look at how Hawaii developed because of the population demographics and economics. And I mean, for me, I really mourn, because I grew up on the windward side, I mourn the desecration of the land by the military especially. So I didn't, I see the gradual change from taro to rice and to other crops, and then other food trying to be raised and made money from. But what really got me when I looked at this book was how also real estate development, how that transformed the land, and the military takeover of Mokapu Peninsula totally changed that landscape, including the reefs. The reefs were dynamited to build deep water channels. And when you see the aerial pictures, and my dad is a water person, so I grew up loving the water, and to see the whole reef just destroyed, so that a big boat could go up into the military base there. It's just heartbreaking. So anyway, that's not about agriculture, but that's my short long response.
Thank you. Professor Joe, looks like you raised your hand. Would you like to jump in?
Yeah, actually, I want to chime in. In Robin's presentation, there is a photo of rice paddies. So the rice paddies is a technique, agricultural technique that Chinese immigrants brought in to Hawaii, as well as to other places in the diaspora. So that's one. And then I mentioned Sun Yat-sen. So in Dr. Sun Yat-sen's ancestral home lies a tamarind tree. And that tamarind tree is already 140 some years old. And that was Dr. Sun Yat-sen brought back from Hawaii. And then of course, the one of the a person in the audience mentioned the Chinese violet, the Bai Lan Hua. I grew up with Bai Lan Hua, and I knew that it was from Hawaii. So it was very interesting that Bai Lan Hua Su only grew rampant, a lot in Zhongshan, not in other places. So that's also kind of a testimony of the Chinese diaspora and their influence back home.
Thank you very much. Other questions, comments? Anyone? Also a question for Professor Joe, Professor Osorio.
It really is a question this time. Given
One person was asking to confirm the Chinese to Hawaii is from Zhongshan. Zhongshan is Xiangshan. In the old days, it was Xiangshan. And later on, after Dr. Sun Yat-sen died, the county was named after him. Now it's a metropolitan region of more than 3 million people. It used to be a market town in which Pākē is the central of the region. So it's Zhongshan, in Pinyin, CHONGSHAN. So it's in the broader Canton area.
Thank you. Actually, there were a couple more questions online. I don't know that we have time for, yeah, Craig, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just real quickly, it's clear that Ahlo became extremely wealthy over a period of time with multiple properties and everything else until the guano expedition blew everything up. How did he go from being a contract laborer, being brought in on a 5-year contract, to the level of affluence that seemed to have developed over that period of time? Just if you could talk a little bit about the movement into sort of prominence and even affluence on the part of these arrivals.
Well, as far as I could see, he started off small with a small store, actually on Mauna Kea Street, and then built up. But I think really he was if you want to know my opinion, he was a great social networker. I think he was very liked apparently by everyone. And my theory is that he grew up under a fortune teller father, and he knew that talent of reading somebody, reading a person. He saw his father know how to read a person. I mean, Ahlo was very good with people, and he built puis. He built puis with, there's a ad that he's partnering with this guy Hazelden, a Caucasian man, to have a store or plantation, I can't remember, on the Big Island in Kohala. He had several businesses in Kohala. So either he made connections when he was in Kohala, Big Island beforehand, or made connections with people who were traveling through his stores. He just seemed to naturally connect. He had a lot of like back and forth of leasing, subleasing, then trading properties. He traded properties with Reverend Parker, who was the Reverend of Kauai Church. So, these land records are fascinating. You see how land's exchanging and you're like, whoa, that family, whoa, they had a lot of land, like certain missionary families, you see. But yeah, so I think a lot of merchants, there was that rising up from small merchant to big landowner. And what I think is that there was this natural hui system that already existed in Chinese culture and that they exploited. And they also stood up for each other, as we saw politically. And yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I think I'm really curious, and for anyone who's still listening, about the role the Catholic faith played in their lives, because Lahela transferred her Catholic faith to her children, her Hanai daughters, and Ahlo is also buried in the Catholic cemetery. And so at some point he converted to Catholicism, and he was super philanthropic. He reached out to all these poor people, gave money to the Hawaiians who are suffering from cholera and things like that. So I think he had a real philanthropic trait that came from that Christian faith. And I don't know how that might have happened, That's a real question I have.
We actually had a question for you, but that's okay. We'll tell them to. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Yeah, okay, thanks, Professor. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Robin. Professor Joe, did you also want to?
Yeah, I just want to respond to one. I was trying to type it. One audience question about how to go about finding his own family history in Zhongshan. Actually, you could connect to the Chinese organizations in Honolulu, especially I think it's the United Chinese Society, and in the mainland we call the Chinese Benevolent Association. They have good connections to the Office of Overseas Chinese Affairs in Zhongshan. These people, their work is to reach out to the diaspora and help diasporic people and their descendants to connect to their roots, to connect to their families. So I would encourage you to reach out to them, or when you have a chance to go to China to visit, try to connect to the Office of Overseas Chinese Affairs. Every single city, every single town in the Canton region has an office that cater to the needs of overseas Chinese.
Thank you so much. That's a really great suggestion. Well, clearly this is a topic that really resonates with all of us, Robin. It's just a thrilling project, and we look forward to hearing more from you as you continue to work and build your research and perhaps build out a film or however you choose to share with us these really fascinating and important discoveries that you're making. So on behalf of our audience here in person, as well as our audience in Zoom, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and your time with us today.
Thank you.
So again, to Professor Joe, Professor Osorio for your expertise and really wonderful comments and discussion as well. Mahalo, everybody.
Mahalo, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good
Another
night.
comment or please via email. Aloha no.